So to begin, there's a fair warning that needs to be given for this story because I'm going to go into a dark place. I'm going to talk about my past, a past in which almost never led to a future. Now, this warning is a little discretion for you if you're sensitive to certain topics, things that include self-harm. This might not be for you, but I will say that there is a happy ending to the story. There's something that's positive that's coming out of this story, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to share it. One of the reasons why I decided to share it was because back then when I felt alone in my pit of despair and my depression, I wish I knew sooner that I wasn't alone. So if you are deciding to watch this, please watch it to the end, and I think you will see and understand that we aren't alone in this world. We aren't alone on this journey called life. And I was seeking to, do the cliche permanent solution to a temporary problem, and that was tough. And it's tough sometimes reflecting back on it. I'll talk about the story of me growing up, the event, the things that happened after the event, which I'm still to this day disappointed on how things were handled, and then how I was able to overcome those traumas and where I'm at now. I'll start by talking about how I came about coming to the US. My parents, they immigrated from Iran. I was 2 months old, so I grew up. My first memories were of me being in a crib. There's a blessing and a curse of having a good memory. It helps me with memorizing lines as an actor. It's also a curse in the sense that little moments in life trigger me to have little mini flashbacks to my life when I went through some traumas, or there's some good times and some bad times, but when someone will talk about how awesome life was when we lived in Montreal, and I can't help but package those memories into what they also were, which were traumas that included bullying, harassing, name calling, and borderline torture. So my first memories being a kid in Austin, Texas, growing up, having two older brothers. The bullying wasn't that severe because my dad was in our life all the time, every day. He was a good dad, and he was well-meaning. He worked 2 jobs. He really hustled to put food on the table. My mom also worked at a Church's Chicken fast food restaurant, kind of like KFC if you don't know what Church's is. And sometimes after school we would go sit there and do our homework or coloring books or whatever. I have some fond memories of my parents, at least the part where they worked really hard to provide for us, and it was extra challenging for them not knowing English that well. They barely spoke it, and so might have had some to do with the obstacles of trying to raise us and pick up on the issues that I was going through, pick up on the traumas, pick up on my cries for help. So there were times that I would feel neglected, and I would lash out in the form of cursing or whatever, or do things that I just didn't pick up on, like that were like socially normal. My mom would give me coins for the laundry, and I would see an arcade, and I was a kid, so I was like, oh, let's use these coins to play some games. That led to me getting in trouble, and my parents, like many parents back in the 80s, followed the corporal punishment approach. So I got some spankings, nothing that aggressive. Was it effective? Yeah, I guess I stopped doing some things, but that's come to being known as not the best way. There are other ways. I've had pepper in my mouth. I didn't have a potty mouth after that. So I suppose in their mind it worked. So that's the path that they chose to continue doing. So the years in Austin weren't that bad. We avoided having to go to Farsi school because my middle brother threw a fit. The teachers actually did the kids and embarrassed them. So because my middle brother had a traumatic experience, they decided to keep me out of that. So they were a little bit mindful of some things. And then at some point, our visa expired. We had to leave. We had to move. And so we were headed to Canada. We stayed in Pennsylvania until we were able to cross the border. So we had this experience of being kind of like refugees. We were able to seek asylum in Canada, and we started building a life there. Unfortunately, without the presence of my dad. He stayed back and started to build up his car dealership. He started with his own 2 cars, cleaning them and washing them himself. And I'm very proud of him because he built that up into something that's still thriving today. But before I digress into more accomplishments, of my dad, I'll say that the downfall was not being in my life anymore every day. He would come visit us, but then school would start in Montreal, and their school system's a little bit more advanced. So I didn't know French, and at the time I didn't know how to read and write. So French became the first language forced to read and write, and it was super challenging. I mean, I had a very hard time because I was already a poor student. I had trouble learning. So then we start school, and it was an aggressive approach to learning because I couldn't do anything. I couldn't use the restroom until I started speaking the language, which in some way helped me. But as soon as I went to the restroom, I encountered my first group of bullies. They kicked open the restroom. I was naked. I was startled, and of course they laughed at me. And I started dreading going to the bathroom randomly. I started dreading being alone because I didn't know who was gonna try to punk me. And my school is also very black and white with rules. When we had recess, we had to stay outside. Even when it was like freezing outside and I didn't have gloves, they would not let me in the building until I started crying because my hands were so cold that I thought I was like close to getting frostbite. So then they let me in, and I was able to warm my hands back up by the radiator they had. So there were little moments like that in school where I was a poor student. I was given some help with a specialized tutor in school that helped me kind of fast track me to learn some things that I guess didn't learn when I was in kindergarten. I don't know. It was kind of weird. Like there was this expectation of knowing how to write and read at this particular level. One of the things I did wrong was I would write my letters from the bottom up. And so I got made fun of for stuff like that, which was really weird. Like, how about just help me and not make fun of me? But that was their style. That's how they hoped that we would learn, through humiliation. But that tactic just was like scarring. It was not fun. And then, of course, we get moved from one school to another. Some move my mom decided to make because she was told that there was another better school for her kids. So me and my middle brother got moved to another school right after we had formed some friendships in the first school that we were at. So that was yet another thing that was traumatizing and that sucked, was having to move schools. And then this is when things started to get really bad. My babysitter would lock me up in the bathroom 2 to 3 hours a day, every day during the school week. And there was no rhyme or reason for it. It was do your homework and then get thrown in the bathroom until my mom would get home. And the sounds of her knock was like joy because I finally got to be free. It was dark, the lights were off. I got maybe a little glimmer of light from the crack of the door at the bottom, and I was so bored that I started counting fibers on the bath mat on the floor. When my mom would come home and I would complain to her about it, it was as if I made it up, or if it wasn't that big a deal. I don't know. She didn't act on it. And you're probably wondering, why didn't she just change the babysitter? Well, it turned out the babysitter was my brother. So I was stuck with him. And I didn't do anything to my brother. That's the thing that bothered me the most, is I was just an innocent child. I was just trying to learn and be a brother, and I was so confused. And so going through those experiences like really pissed me off, and it really confused me. And I just felt like I didn't have a good life at school. I didn't have a good life at home. My homework would take me hours. I didn't get my homework. And actually, I think I might have subconsciously sabotaged my learning abilities so that as long as I was working on my homework, I couldn't go in the restroom. But then my mom would ask why it took me so long to do homework. So she wrote a note for the teacher, sent it to the teacher with me, and asked why the homework she's assigning me takes 4 to 5 hours a day. Of course, the teacher reads this note and decides to read it out loud to all the other students. And then she starts surveying everybody. How long does it take you to do your homework? And the average answer was like an hour max. So I got embarrassed yet again. But then some good news came. My dad showed up one day, put in a VHS into the VCR. It's how we used to play videos back in the day. And it was about this master plan community that was on the rise called The Woodlands. It was a suburb north of Houston, and it was pretty cool. And in that video montage, I saw a kid doing karate, and I thought, that's cool. Maybe I'll be able to do that. But most importantly, we would get to move home with my dad. And that to me was like, yes, please. Then I won't be bullied and tortured at home anymore. And so we decided to make that move, and it was a little sad because we had to leave our friends, but we were starting a new life, a new chapter, and I was very much looking forward to that. Fast forward to the Woodlands. My first couple of years were all right. I made some friends pretty quickly, but I was extremely shy and awkward. And so when random people would try to engage with me, if they didn't seem nice, I would kind of clam up. That awkwardness led to me getting made fun of again, or also kept me from making like friends with everybody. I just had a small circle of guy friends that, you know, we nerded out on the same stuff. So it was cool, but it was also awkward. And if I didn't know anybody on the bus rides were dreadful because I got made fun of. And I was also a target, aside from my size, because of my name. I grew up with the Persian name Payman. However, on my birth certificate, it's spelled P-E-I-M-A-N. This spelling led to many iterations of it being mispronounced in the way that was done to make fun of me. Anything from Pieman to P-Man and everything in between. Paymon, which the Paymon part, that was actually kind of cool, but I guess I was so frustrated by being made fun of that I wanted to change. And I remember seeing the movie Life of Pi, where the protagonist talks about being made fun of for his name, and I think it was like Piscine, and they were making fun of him. And when I saw that part of the movie,
are you pissing right now?
that was the first time that I heard someone else's story about their name and how it was used to make fun of them and how they didn't like it. So I related to that character really fast. So when I had the opportunity, I changed my name, and I thought Paymon, Raymond, Ray. I was just like, let's just cut it. Let's make it super short and sweet. And Ray stuck. The alternative was Ken, because I liked Street Fighter, but could you imagine a Persian kid named Ken? I don't know. Maybe there's one out there, but I luckily chose Ray, stuck with it, and it's worked well for me ever since. But then, of course, if I had a substitute teacher, that became my new obstacle. I'd have to do a beeline towards them. As soon as I would see that we had a substitute teacher, I would say, hey, my name, it's spelled Paymon, but I go by Ray, and I would hope that they would either remember or write it down. And of course, if they didn't, they would get to it and butcher it like crazy, and laughter would ensue. And it was a soft spot. I mean, I was sensitive to that because I got made fun of it so much. Part of me wishes I would have been able to just gotten over it. It was a sore spot. Then high school started, and I decided to opt out of physical education PE by joining the track and field team, which in the physical education like module class, there were some awkward kids that were, you know, more into like the punk and goth stuff, and I didn't relate to them. So I was like, I don't want to be here. They don't seem like they want to be here. So let me choose another elective. And so track and field was on the table. I didn't have to try out. I just could join, and I did. And I got to, I didn't really like running much, so I opted for pole vaulting. Got us out of the extra running. I wasn't any good. I couldn't even bend a pole, so I didn't do well at all. And of course, I also ended up with a bunch of testosterone pumped athlete wannabes. Some of them were actually good athletes, but they ended up bullying me. A lot of them did. And there was a time I remember where I got thrown into a trash can, slid into the showers with the water on, and I got basically covered in water. I was able to get myself out of the trash can, and to hide the tears, the urge of crying, I started smirking, and I got a towel and I started hitting the guys that were responsible in a retaliatory way. And I had that smile because I didn't want them to know that they won, that they got to. So I played it off. But I was pissed. And on my way home, I was just like so fed up, you know, being made fun of, being bullied, being picked on, and not really having deep friendships. I had some friends, but I just pretty much had it, and I didn't want to go back to school. When I did get home on that particular day, though, you know, I did the usual ritual of like greeting my mom, hey, and then having to go upstairs to do my homework. And at this time, I was like not a terrible student. I wasn't great, but it was a lot easier than my time in Montreal. For some reason or other, me and my middle brother got into an argument, and we would get into arguments for stupid reasons. But he was a bully to me, so he would threaten to like beat me up. He was aggressive. So my mom got involved, and usually she tries to not take sides, but for some reason this time she decided that she would get a little more aggressive, and she yelled at me and questioned my scholastic abilities. She hit a trigger, and it was almost like this disappointment on her face of like, why didn't I become as good of a student as my middle brother? So I was not in a good place. And then, my dad wasn't in town because even though we were living together, he would go on trips to Florida. He would go to the auctions to buy cars. And so times of the week where he wasn't around, and so my mom maybe took out her miserable loneliness on me, but I was done. I threw in the towel. I couldn't handle not having any positive relationships. I think I had maybe one girlfriend, and then I dated another girl, but I got broken up with, so really was a sore spot that led to me being a bit depressed. And so I decided I'm done. I don't need to be here anymore. I mean, the bullying got pretty severe, and I thought to myself, like, this isn't a life worth living. I kept playing back in the back of my head little things like, I look up to people. You're too short. I got made fun of and picked on for being short, little, and then among my friends, I was the shortest kid for many years. So I was short and I was skinny, and I was the punchline of a lot of jokes. So after hearing those play back in my head over and over, I decided to go to the backyard. I grabbed a roll of duct tape and I wrapped it around my neck, and I went to the jacuzzi. I dunked my head, and maybe in a way, like, I didn't want to, because why would I choose the jacuzzi like when I can just lift my head up? So of course, instinctually, I did lift my head up to get some air, because that survival mechanism inside of us. But the duct tape was on too tight, and so I started to pace around, desperate to get this duct tape off me, because I actually, second thoughts, maybe that wasn't the way for me. It was starting to hurt. So while I'm struggling, I all of a sudden feel some yanking, and it turned out my brother decided to step out for a cigarette, and he smoked to get back at my parents. We didn't like the fact that they smoked. He saw his smoking habit as a way to get back to them. He decided to have a cigarette on this particular night, and so he saw me and he started yanking at the duct tape, and duct tape's hard to break. You could rip it if you find the right spot, and he finally happened to get it, ripped it open, and looked at me, was pissed, and I was gasping for breath. And then he started to hit me over and over again, like in the face, in the chest, and I was like confused and pissed, and I shoved him. And then my mom, of course, hears the commotion, so she steps outside in the patio area and starts, wondering what happened. She was very anxious. She was a very anxious person, so she would her voice was very high pitched and high strung, where her concerns were very always high pitched. Like if you're in the car with her and you brake too fast, she would lose herself a little bit. And so my brother would explain to her what I was doing. So he was pissed, in his mind, rightfully so. And then my mom told us to go inside, and he explained to her what happened, I guess. But I went upstairs, and I was so mad at the way he handled it. I was already thinking of another way I was gonna do it. I was pissed. I'm over here. This is the ultimate cry for help, and this is how you treat me. So I was done, and I go upstairs, and I'm about to go in my room, but then my brother's girlfriend at the time decides to sit, invite me to sit down with them to watch a movie. Kind of scoffed at her. She's like, no, she insisted. So she grabbed me. I sat down next to her. My brother came back, and I don't know what he did. Maybe tapped me on the back, almost like a hey, I'm sorry, but I don't fully remember that because I was so mad at him. But then the pivotal moment, the ultimate moment that probably saved me and was like, I don't know, my saving grace probably, and a moment that also led me to want to help other people in some way with the signal. Like, hey, she extended her wrists, and I could see the scars on them from what it looked like were cuts, scars of cuts that were obviously unsuccessful, but they were attempts nonetheless. And that shattered my belief system. From that day, I realized that I was not alone in this world in my suffering. I wasn't the only one. And when I realized that, I didn't feel lonely anymore, because for the longest time, I felt lonely. I felt, even though I had friends on the surface, when I wasn't around my friends, I was suffering really, really bad, and I thought the world was a cruel and evil place, and I didn't see purpose. But when she showed me her wrist, she basically saved my life. From that day, I didn't make any other attempts, but then also nothing else happened. Nothing else came of it. My parents never took me to a counselor. I mean, we went to family counseling, but this was a completely different moment in time. My family never brought it up. My brother never brought it up. It was as if this moment never happened. And when I reflect back on the way things were handled, it led to some confusion. It led to some questioning. And anytime I would bring it up, my mom and dad would defend my brother and saying the way he was raised. My dad wasn't around, so that was an excuse for him. He was the recipient of corporal punishment. My dad was hard on him, so he took it out on us. It was like no big deal. He went through it. And I don't harbor any hard feelings towards my brother. I was told to have a talk with him, but I remember one thing was brought up in the past casually. It wasn't an aggressive mention, but he denied it or played it off like it never happened. So I said, if I ever brought up this situation, would he even acknowledge it as something that happened, or would he just try to bury it again? So I kind of pushed past it, and I try to reflect on the positive that came out of it. The girlfriend that he smoked a cigarette, probably saved my life. So the situation was handled poorly, in my opinion. Then when I realized I can make something of my life, that I'm not alone, I started doing better in school. I started to participate in activities where I would go on to form friendships. I joined the rugby club, and finally I found a sport that I kind of took to, and I was actually pretty good. I would score almost every other game at least once, and that garnered the respect of my team. I formed some friendships that I'll never forget, and it was a pretty cool experience because playing rugby got you respect. It was one of those tough sports. There was one game where I knocked someone down from the other team, and it was just the reaction of the bench, the players that were watching along the sideline. They went crazy. And then there was another play where this guy twice my size was coming at me, and if he broke past me, the other team would have scored. And I gripped him around the jersey, spun around, and slammed him down. And that was like an epic moment during a tournament that we had. So after high school, I went on to college, and in college, I joined a fraternity. I graduated with a degree in broadcast management, and I minored in French. I started playing poker on the side, made some great friends, and I was living life. I had some ups and downs in college, of course. I had probably a decent amount of struggle trying to make ends meet financially, but overall, the only traumatic experience I faced in college was breaking down to my mom the news that I was not going to be pre-med. I decided to pursue pre-med, and I do talk about this in my other video, where I kind of just pursued the passions that my parents had for me to try to make them proud. And I realized I can help people in other ways. I don't have to pursue medicine. That's not the only way to help people. And I figured broadcast management, it was just another excuse to get in front of the camera. I, at this time, decided, I want to say between my sophomore and junior year, I decided I want to be an actor. And so I started pursuing that, and broadcast management was just another excuse to be in front of the camera. Mind you, I was extremely shy. And I was terrified at public speaking. But at a certain point in my life, I wanted to face my fears head on. And so I went on this pursuit of acting, and I have to say it was the hardest but best decision of my life. There have been a lot of ups and downs in that pursuit as well. But you come to realize there's ups and downs in all aspects of life. So I decided to just put in the work and focus on how I can become better as a person, and then how I can use my life experiences to help other people. Ultimately, the biggest takeaway from this video, if you've gotten this far, is to reach out to those who seem like they're happy but they're hiding it. Reach out to those people that you see getting bullied or picked on. You know, people can be fragile and they might brush off insults, but deep down there could be some pain and some trauma. And I think our goal in life should be to help others, to make this life that we have, this one life, meaningful in some way. And for me, helping other people through my messages, through my just pursuit of my own passion, makes me a better person. And as I continue to succeed, I will pass that along. So if there's anything that you've experienced in your life that you want to share, feel free to comment. I will read all the comments, especially for this video, because, you know, like I said, I realized from doing another video that a lot of people have gone through experiences in life that are worth sharing and that are worth talking about. This is one of those things that's been challenging for me to reflect on, and I do hope to get some closure one day. I will approach the conversation when the time is right, but I'm feeling a lot better having done this. And if you are someone who needs help, there are places that you can call, people that you can reach out to, so don't go at it alone. Don't be afraid to ask. With that, I will move on to better, more uplifting stories, and I hope to turn this channel into a place where people can gain some inspiration from. There's some successes that I've shared in my life, but this is one of those where I was at my lowest point and I was able to pick myself up. Some people aren't so lucky, so I hope we can do better. I hope humanity can do better, and I'm optimistic about it. So until next time, peace.